Guys, it is first episode of Myths Exposed in Religion and Politics inside Indo-Continent. Eventually I keep interacting some renowned intellectuals of this continent, and due to their reservations I will either censor their name or narrate without the name the intellectuals I interrogated. In the world of books, there's an intriguing tale about Zakir Naik. Some people refer to him as a controversial figure. I find it odd how certain individuals can immediately tell who is of a different faith or background. Take the example of Jinnah. Do we overly glorify him? Absolutely. In every sense. He wasn't particularly concerned with minor details like whether the food he ate was halal or not. He was, after all, a British educated man. It seemed as though Jinnah had reached a point of no return. Caught up in a situation with no clear way out. And then, there's Nawaz Sharif. He, too, had his own moments of ambition. Wanting to be more than just a politician. A puppet slave launched by army to serve their motives. It's like how Bhagat Singh and Ranjit Singh's only fault was being born into a religion that some considered wrong. As for writers, I don't believe in labels. Whether it's a novelist or a travel writer, they each have their own identity. I once heard an amusing tale about Sargodha, that when Hanuman was flying toward Sri Lanka, he spotted the famous Kinau orchards of Sargodha. In his eagerness to grab some, he accidentally dropped the mountain he was carrying. Such stories, legends, and myths blend reality and imagination seamlessly. In another whimsical turn, some say that Alexander the Great converted to Islam and even performed Hajj. If he had truly embraced the faith, wouldn't that have changed history's perception of him? Economics, a profound discipline, has its own tales. It's said that even Hazrat Umar once attacked Sindh. As the discussion began, the topic shifted to the many versions of the story of Karbala and how it changes depending on different sources. There seemed to be an almost insatiable curiosity whenever certain Islamic months, like Rabi' al-Awwal, approached. Debates sparked over whether the month should be celebrated for the Prophet's birth or mourned for his passing. One guest recalled how this specific celebration, known as Mawlid, was actually invented much later, around the 13th century, somewhere in Iraq. He emphasized that no one truly knew the exact date of the Prophet's birth. With a nostalgic smile, he remembered when people used to call the day, 12th of Wafat, during the 1950s and 60s. A term that signified mourning instead of celebration. Another intriguing point was brought up about the authenticity of hadith. A claim, attributed to the scholar Ghulam Ahmad Parvez, suggested that many of the hadiths were compiled 300 to 400 years after the Prophet's time and were recorded more in meaning than in exact wording. This raised doubts about their reliability. The speaker acknowledged the significance of this discussion, recognizing it as a vital part of Islamic history. He spoke of Bukhari's compilation in Bukhara, pointing out that it was derived from a massive collection of narrations, many of which were filtered out, leaving just the 6 or 7 volumes we see today. He recalled his friend's assertion, a respected Hanafi scholar, that there existed a book with records of the Prophet's sayings that had been compiled during his lifetime. Though the speaker admitted he hadn't read it due to his lack of proficiency in Arabic, he noted that his friend vouched for its authenticity, even suggesting it predated the famous Muwatta of Imam Malik. This conversation shifted to the broader skepticism that surrounds early Islamic history. The speaker mentioned how some people, like the scholar Ghadi, dismissed even famous stories like the Prophet's encounter in the cave of Hira as myths. merely tales told through word of mouth. He pointed out that today's audiences are extremely sensitive, making it difficult to present such narratives without facing backlash. The speaker then took a more personal tone, recounting how Gardi had to leave the country due to the controversy stirred by his research. The honesty of Gardi's work was clear to those who understood it, but even his friends, brave as they were, carried weapons for their safety. One friend had chosen to stay despite the threats, demonstrating immense courage. Reflecting on modern times, the speaker admitted that early Islamic history had become a field riddled with doubt, with so much refuted and questioned that it felt as if only the basics remained steadfast. He spoke of how references in newly published books seemed foreign and unfamiliar to him, mentioning Ibn Sa'd's Tabaqat as an example of a source he had only recently encountered. It was clear to all listening that historical narratives, especially those concerning the foundations of faith, were not only complex but were also subject to reinterpretation over centuries, raising as many questions as answers. In the pursuit of uncovering historical narratives, I ventured to find a particular manuscript known as Tabaqat. I believed it necessary to read through it to gain a deeper understanding. Along my journey of historical research, I stumbled upon a repeated theory echoed by several individuals. It spoke of how, after the defeat of Yazd by Hazrat Umar, a subtle form of revenge took place wherein queens of that time influenced and altered certain aspects of Islamic history. This notion intrigued me as I pondered over the potential impact of various cultures, particularly the influence of ancient Zoroastrians or Magus on Islam. One common observation has been the syncretism of traditions. For instance, elements of worshipping at graves seem to stem not directly from Islamic teachings but from the ancient practices embedded in local beliefs, possibly shared between the early Sanatan traditions and those of the Magus. The idea that Zoroastrians had a profound influence, however, was not something I found directly evident in my studies. A surprising insight came through discussing military history, particularly the victories of Hazrat Khalid bin Walid over Persia. Although he achieved great feats on the battlefield, his sudden recall by Hazrat Umar hinted at internal dynamics and decisions within the leadership. Further, I was reminded of the early attempts by Muslim forces to expand their territories, such as attacks on Sindh that preceded the conquest of Muhammad bin Qasim. This conquest was documented in two key historical sources, Chachnama and Futu al-Buldan. The Chachnama, initially a war diary from the time of King Chach and his successors, was later translated by Ali bin Hamid Kufi, a notable researcher of the 13th century. This work was known to detail events from as early as the late 6th century up to the rule of Raja Dahir, incorporating both historical accounts and oral traditions. On the other hand, Futu al-Buldan, authored by Ahmad Baladuri, chronicled the military campaigns and expansions of the Arab forces, written about a century after the events it described. It provided a crucial perspective on the Arab conquests and the administrative changes that followed. The anonymous author of the original war diary was believed to be a relative of Muhammad bin Qasim, offering an insider's view into the military strategies and personal accounts of the time. Despite these sources being available, the passing centuries have layered history with interpretations and skepticism. Between the 8th and 13th centuries, many historians and scholars grappled with authenticity and translation, embedding their own perspectives into the records they preserved. Thus, when revisiting the annals of history, one must tread carefully, distinguishing fact from embellishment. all while acknowledging the biases that the passage of time imposes on our understanding of these early Islamic conquests. Keep in touch with channel to view next episode of this topic, Myths Exposed in Religion and Politics. Inside Indo-Continent.